Welcome back. This is The Key Point on TV3, also on 3FM 92.7 and live around the world at 3news.com. Also on our Facebook page, TV3 Ghana. I'll quickly introduce a panelist. From my extreme left, we have Professor Vladimir Nchidanso. He is the Director of Academic Affairs at the Ghana Armed Forces and Staff Command College. Next is Mr. Edmond Foley. He is a law lecturer and head of the Public Law Department at GIMPA. We also have with us Mr. Albert Yale-Yang. He's the National Network Coordinator of WANEP Ghana. We're expecting one other guest to join us. When he comes in, we'll do the needful and do the introduction and when he comes in. Good morning, gentlemen, and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Well, this week has been a difficult one, as it were, because the findings of the committee that put together a report in respect of the incident that happened at Manson Kwanta, somewhere in the Ashanti region, is putting out or has put out certain information that is quite worrying, in the sense that the 7 young men who were gunned down sometime in July this year, who according to the police at the time were armed robbers who engaged in gunfire with the police. It turns out that these men were not armed robbers. At least that's what the committee report is saying, that no facts were before them to establish that indeed these 7 young men deceased were armed robbers. Of course, you do recall that when the incident happened, the residents of the area were agitating and called for an investigation into this matter, which led to the setting up of a committee. And since then, this is what has come up. We'll be looking at that, but we'll take a listen to, I think, a soundbite that came from the Ashanti Regional Command in respect of this matter, and then we'll come to the panelists for that conversation.
Upon intelligence, a search was intensified in the forest at Manso Dome Biposo, about 3 kilometers away from the crime scene. Upon our search, we retrieved 4 AK-47 assault rifles, 1 SMG number 1974611, and also retrieved 1 G3 number not yet known. We also retrieved 1 pump action gun. We also retrieved 5 boxes of live AK-47 ammunition. Toyota Corolla car with registration number BA295/15 and unregistered motorbike with a rider and pillion appeared driving towards the Manso Kwanta direction. The police signaled them to stop, but they ignored the signal and started firing at the police.
The main issue is the death, the murder of the 7 innocent brothers. We know that they are innocent. The police just concocted a story. And we just want an independent investigation. And we know they will come out clean.
I mean, that last speaker there, clearly his statement is quite instructive. He says the police concocted. I mean, I'll start with you, Prof. Looking at what the police said at the time, which we played back here, and the findings of the committee. I mean, this gentleman was speaking before the committee's report came, but it sounds prophetic, as it were. I mean, on hindsight, because he's saying the police concocted. We clearly find ourselves in a very difficult situation with such situations or such incidents occurring, don't we?
We do somehow. I mean, it's very unfortunate such situations happen almost everywhere in the world, you know, and police are alleged to be concocting stories, and they would actually when they are pushed to the corner. But the point is, in this particular incident, whether the story was concocted or not, there was an incident. And in investigating that incident, I think the police didn't have the right temperament for it. I've been watching some program, CBS reality or that sort of thing, and you would see the patience and the methodical approach that the police would do, the patience in getting to the bottom of the. At times they would get somebody whom they think they've nailed, connected to the incident, but then meticulously they are able to I mean, weed out those persons and get really to the, but in this instance, there is the possibility that the police really saw these things in the bush, as was being said. I'm not trying to vindicate them. There is the possibility that these things were there. But then as soon as they saw some people, riding motorbikes and or in a car or that sort of thing, and they stopped them and they didn't stop, then they have found their victim, kind of, and then they started shooting. It happened in Taifa. It's happened several times. Personally, I strongly believe that it's because we have not been able to push our police to the levels where they would have the patience not to pull the trigger and be able to meticulously push and find the real persons. An incident has happened. They are eager to get the culprit. They are eager to show that they're working. After all, it is their work. Now they find some evidence. Now they find me perhaps around the crime scene, and I'm the culprit. That is the lacuna in our kind of training and our kind of way the professional with the police work. So it's a very unfortunate incident. And I believe once the committee has been able to come out clearly to say that it was one of those things, like the Taifa incident, we need to move forward and be able to ensure that these things don't happen in the random way they are happening in our country.
Right. Even before we move on to look at the way forward, I'd want to raise one other thing with you. You indicated rightly that an incident had happened and the police were doing their work. And that incident that happened perhaps is of critical interest here, in the sense that a colleague of theirs had been shot prior to that incident. And so they were on the lookout for perhaps the possible assailants or what have you. It is also true that in Ghana, I mean, there's this perception that the police would act in a certain way when one of their own is involved. Yeah. So clearly, there's that perception that it was one of such things that happened. Right. How do you see that?
It happens. Look, come on. I mean, I'm a teacher. If something happens to a teacher, I'm so very much involved, and the temperament and everything comes out. You see, I think, was it Teman or that sort of thing, one of their own was killed, dismembered, and hidden in 7 different places. But within days, they were able to come out. No, we have a very professional police. And one of your kind has been killed, and you are at the crime scene. The adrenaline level in you, in the anxiety to find who did this, because it could have been you, is there. So psychologically, let's place them there. But then...
But is that really appropriate? I'm not trying to be hard on them, but I'm just trying to understand, because as a police personnel or person, you have a certain responsibility.
I see where you're coming from, but I say we are human beings. Yes, they work professionally towards every other incident of that nature. But when it is one of their own, the psyche around it is completely different. And that is where they may come, I agree with, that's where they may either commit mistakes or not work properly, kind of. And so, yes, this kind of thing, they were very eager to get to the bottom, because those persons who were at the scene to look for the culprits, could have had this psychology that it could have been me. So let me work. But the trigger happiness, is something we must work on very seriously. I think off camera we were discussing this thing, and my colleague to my right was talking about how in Canada, in the US, and several other places, the training involves pressurizing the person to the point where he needs to do something, but they will hardly pull the trigger. They will hardly pull the trigger. They are trained as diplomats to be able to get to the bottom. I mean, when they are even talking to the culprit themselves, things come out. But has the society here been able to have such a situation where the policeman is not trigger happy, when the policeman doesn't feel that because of the uniform and because of the gun he is wielding, he is superior to the incident, he is superior to the person he's talking to.
Right.
That is something we need to be looking at.
Great. Now, Mr. Foley, I'm coming on the back of that. The usual refrain when such incidents happen is that we had to defend ourselves. And clearly, Professor Ntwidanso has brought in the facts about what pertains in other jurisdictions, which is, yes, you may be confronted or facing a situation where, your life perhaps is at risk, and but you need to employ certain skills or tactics or techniques, as it were. But here, we had to defend ourselves. Now, how do we, is it a question of how they are trained, or what exactly do you think it is?
Right, thank you. If you look at our laws on self-defense, the circumstances in which you can defend yourself and the circumstances in which the police can use force to effect an arrest, for instance, there's a slight distinction. In the case of self-defense, the law allows, and this is for all of us, including ordinary citizens,
Right.
to kill in extreme circumstances. The Criminal Offences Act says, yes, in extreme cases, even extending to killing. So self-defense is not always killing. Yes, you could defend yourself through physical contact with the person. Now, in effecting an arrest, the police exercise very wide powers.
Right.
Yes, I mean, policing powers are extremely wide. And I think that is where they are not able to make the distinction at times. I have grappled even with the term armed robbery in this country. If you look at the law says robbery. And robbery basically is stealing with violence.
Right.
So it is not in all instances that the person who has committed a possible crime of stealing would have done so even with a gun. But for argument's sake, in more instances than not, we've been told guns have been used.
Some weapons of sorts, yeah.
So something doesn't add up in this story from the police end. Right, you recovered weapons from some place, right? And you say there was fire. Your investigations need to establish, even after you have shot these people, that the fire came from them. You see, so for you to conclude every time you shoot people that they are the ones who shot you is a bit problematic. Because after the incident, we still expect them to investigate. The fact that you have even shot somebody who shot at you does not conclude the investigation. You will still need to find out, because they are remedial measures. They are preventive measures. All right, in future, we need to maybe secure this neighborhood. All of that should go into the investigation.
Right.
So it's very sad that perhaps riding from that perspective of it's armed robbery, it's people wielding guns, they would of necessity attack us and we need to defend ourselves. And the moment I think the police go into self-defense mode, we need to treat them as ordinary citizens. As you treat any other Ghanaian who was attacked and pulled a weapon, there you step out of your police powers because you're defending yourself as your
Right,
person.
as a person, yes.
And so it's fair if investigations or inquiry go to that level and you remove the cloak of the policing powers and investigate that. And I think it's fair we have this committee coming to this conclusion and would expect that they be treated as persons who did not act as police officers and also as ordinary citizens.
Right, but looking back at what the commander, the Ashanti Regional Commander, said in the tape we played, set very definitive facts he put out there that we retrieved. He says well, indeed, at a news conference, they displayed 7 boxes with each containing 25 rounds of ammunition, 88 pieces of ammunition, it says AK-47 assault rifles, and some clothes that were retrieved from the suspected armed robbers. Yes. So all these they put there. Clearly, already they had in their minds, it was a done deal.
Yes.
That's why I raised a question about, is it a case of how they are wired or how they are trained? I want to hear on that. I'll be going to the wind-up coordinator because perhaps he would give us. But what do you see as being the problem? Is it how are they well equipped to deal with such situations, or what?
I think, as Prof said, and when we were talking off camera, that stress training, I don't think features in the way our men are trained. To be able to work under pressure. In 2007, in Makola, I witnessed firsthand brutal assault of one of the street hawkers by 2 officers. And that's when I really had my human rights training called into question. Because I said, am I a textbook human rights person, or I should intervene? The gentleman was hit with a baton on the head, bleeding.
Wow.
I plucked courage and approached the 2 men and said, why did you hit him? Their response was, we've stood here in the sun. We've told them not to sell here. They don't listen.
So
nobody has given us water. I took that nobody has given us water part because it's a genuine concern. True. Somebody who has not had water since morning will be
it's of
angry.
a certain mindset.
But that's why you are a police officer. There are certain callings, certain callings that require you to act with a certain level of maturity when pushed to the wall. Yes. One of my senior professors says, no lecturer will ever, in my domain, will ever be forgiven if you push a student to do you a favor for marks.
Definitely.
Yes, you have to pass that stress test, no matter what it is. So we expect the same from the police. If I compare that assault I saw with the training, it obviously told me that these men were not prepared for standing in the sun and being annoyed by a young man who was also earning his daily bread.
Right. We'll be looking deeper quickly. Yes.
One on that. It's true that stress training is not there, but what kind of training? Beyond that, historically, we've had a situation where the colonialists even bestowed on us those aspects of brutality. And so it's like, once I have the gun, once I have the uniform, I have the right to do X, Y, Z.
But I thought we had moved from that when we changed
haven't
it from
yet.
a force to a
Long
service.
years of dictatorial rule in Ghana even cemented that the more. That's number one. Number two, the police, like he is saying, under-resourced, underpaid, etc., etc. And then all of a sudden they're looking for a black cat. If the room is dark, any object that passes is the cat.
Right. Very well. Now, speaking about that black cat thing, I think I'll bring in the issue about profiling, because that's clearly what the analogy you gave suggests. Anything, like, we're looking for a black cat, so anything that's seen in the dark obviously comes out as black, and so we go for it. The Zongo community, when this incident happened, the youth there complained bitterly that the police have been on their case and trying to, do all sorts of things. So clearly there was a stereotype situation going on. Obviously, that isn't how we deal with situations like that. You cannot just profile people and based on how a certain person looks, you just go after such persons. That clearly isn't the way to go. For your work as WANEP Ghana, obviously, I'm sure these things do come up. What has been some of your findings, perhaps, that you've come across in respect of how these things do occur? And what has been some of your efforts at, trying to address these things?
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe before I come to that, I would like to say something briefly on the orientation of the police service.
Right.
You would, and like Prof indicated, you right from the beginning, during the colonial time, the orientation of the police has been that of militarism. Now, and they were even trained by the military group. Now, it was a police force, and the force meant a military group. Now, we became a service. That change of name or nomenclature has not affected the orientation of the actions of the police themselves. So it's been carried away. Now, the other thing is about how they see the law and suspects. Now, very often, when someone commits an offense or is seen to be committing an offense, so you see that they approach you with violence, even when they question you. Normal police procedures on the road, they ask you a question and as if you are already wrong, or that you are already being judged by them.
Yeah,
so that
very
is
judgmental.
Yes, so very judgmental. So they have prejudice against every other person. I think in 2005, WANEP Ghana conducted a survey, amongst the junior ranks, and it came out that once arrested, you have no rights. You understand? So that is the perception. So everyone that is seen to be offending the law is, right from the beginning, guilty. And that is why you see that even the police officer, when he was cataloging the arms and ammunition, it was okay. So this is what we found with the people. So therefore, they are already guilty. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about is how you talk about defense, self-defense. Now, there is a thin line that has to be walked when you are defending yourself. That is looking at the rights of the people, working in a securitized manner, and also being able to defend yourself. But that is something that I think over the time many of them have missed, and that needs to be looked at. And I think, if you look at it recently, the catalog of them, they would always react or overreact.
The recent Adenta, that demonstration there in respect of the road, it's a clear example. And even this week, we heard news about a policeman shooting into a vehicle at, is it the Cape Coast?
Cape Coast, yes. Toll booth, yes.
Toll booth, exactly.
Yes.
And injuring somebody in there. I mean, you look at all
over
these things. I mean, we could catalog a lot, over 50 persons, exactly. And so that you ask yourself, what kind of judgment, are they able to put on a situation to deal with that appropriately? But carry on.
Yes, so you see that they overreact, and we have graduated levels of enforcement in terms of rules of engagement. Very often you see that they jump the gun, to a level that is not commensurate with the level of force that they are, confronted with. And crowd control, I think, is something that very often they miss, and it's one of the, maybe the force itself needs to look at critically, I mean, if you look at the incident in the central region, just 50 persons, the man missed the toll booth, in past, you fired at the vehicle and injured an innocent person who probably was not the one to pay the toll fee. So it's very interesting. So I think that definitely, and there's a need for us to really look at how the police, many of them, especially the junior ranks, can be in a disposition, be able to control themselves emotionally to respond to stressful situations. So there's that part about the person taking, that, if you like, responsibility to put on a certain judgment call. There's that part of it, which is personal. And then there's a part which is an external thing, which has to do with the kind of training given. Exactly. So there are two things. Yes. So you mentioned that they should be less emotional, or they should hasten to react. That's fine. But could we interrogate a little bit the kind of training they have? Because, for as long as I've known the police service to exist, there's been several incidents of stray bullets killing somebody, firing, you talk about crowd control. We do know that in such instances, you fire into, perhaps the air, but you have incidents where they fire into the crowd, and then you ask yourself, what exactly were they trying to shoot people, or were just trying to control the crowd? What is it? So I think there are two things. Yeah. And as your work at ONEP, have you come across any findings? What exactly is it? Because the IGP, I know, consistently talks about a certain transformation agenda, but that transformation agenda is yet to materialize, or is yet to have some evidence in the work of the police, if you ask me. I think the last time one of these things occurred, the loans and whatever.
Oh yes, the lady who was beating to a pulp.
Yes, and I happen to have responded to it, looking at the international standards. The police service, even right from recruitment, what roles are other stakeholders playing in the selection and training of the police service? We acknowledge greatly that the Ghana's police is one of the refined ones, but we still have challenges. I don't want to
see what the unrefined ones are like.
That's what we acknowledge, but there are a lot of things. Now, over the time that someone has been recruited, is there any monitoring on the person's performance in terms of how to handle issues, as a security officer? Or in service training. Are there refresher trainings for them? Very often you ask the question and they tell you, look, since I was recruited, I have never been to any other training.
And recently we did have one of them coming out to, make such categorical
practical engagement training. They don't have it. They don't have that refresher. Training on the orientation of themselves, they don't have that. So I think there is that area that we need to put in more effort in order that we put them to be so contemporary as we expect them to be. For instance, if you look at the shooting in the central region, there are graduate issues. One would ask the question, what prevented the man from shooting to make sure that the vehicle is demobilized? We're actually
showing some visuals here to indicate, some police brutalities in the past. I believe this was the Medina Adenta demonstration. That was just something else. Yes.
You know, so
we seem to be missing one thing.
Right, which is?
We're talking about training, we're talking about on-the-job training and things like that, which should be with every institution. But we are neglecting the society as Ghana. The recruitment, they are not done from Burkina Faso or from Ivory Coast. They are Ghanaians. What kind of society are we having? We have an extremely undisciplined society today in Ghana, very, very much undisciplined. If school kids would burn their headmaster's car, if they would go ahead and want to even rape the wives of their teachers, if they would burn their IT laboratories, if they would go to a police station and want to torch the police station because one of their kind has been arrested, what kind of society are we having? It is from these kind of people. If university students are on rampage and all they do is to destroy about 30 cars, innocent cars parked along the street. You know, what kind of society do we have today? We must look at that also.
Very well. That's
for as long as we recruit from this kind of people, they come and they are already undisciplined. They are people untrainable.
And the system doesn't check them.
Yes,
so we have
just
a minute, Mr. Yolyang. We'll come to that. I think we have Dr. Emmanuel Kwesi Enin on the line. He's the head of the Department of Research at the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. Good morning, Doc. Hello? Hello? Hello, good morning, Doc.
Yes, good morning.
Thank you for joining us. We are really grateful. We are looking at the incident that occurred in July this year, which led to the committee that was set up to look into it. And this week, that committee presented its report to government, and we are looking at that. Key amongst the findings was the fact that the committee said that they didn't have any facts before them to establish that the 7 deceased young men were armed robbers. Doc, what are your perspectives on this?
Well, that is not surprising, particularly about the manner in which the people involved in this crime, and those who ought to have come out to tell us the truth, actually lied. And please permit me 30 seconds to historicize this. The Ghana Police Service faces 3 major problems consistently over time. One has been the issue of recruitment and promotions. The second relates to crowd control, which it has never been able to do. The third relates to what one report from 1986 calls criminal insertion. That is the ability of the service to lie and falsify information about crimes or promotions or official documents, quote, in a manner that is done in such a criminal manner as to defy detection. So if I bring this back to what we are discussing today, you know, it raises fundamental difficulties that a service that has the mission of protecting lives and property can actually shoot and murder people in cold blood, and a lot of senior officers sought to cover up. Now, the questions that it raises deals with the quality of training, command and control, the issuance of arms or weapons with light ammunition, the standard operating procedures around the issuance of such arms, and under what conditions that officers must engage. Once more, as far back as 1970s, the Hockenbauer report made it very clear that not all officers of a particular rank must be given weapons with live ammunition. Actually, the rules are very clear, and that report's rules are clear. It's only officers of the rank above inspector who should be giving weapons for live ammunition. But Asawase also demonstrates multiple levels of oversight failure.
Right.
When this crisis happened, quite a number of the oversight institutions that oversees the Ghana Police Service were very quiet. And Asawase, and not only Asawase, the manner in which the loose routes were dealt with, Adentan routes were dealt with, are increasingly becoming symptomatic of a public institution that's about to implode. These are not individual acts of indiscipline and unprofessionalism. This is a long-term structural decay at the center of the service. And I think it's important and imperative that Asawase, Adentan, and the news routes serve as a wake-up call.
Very well, Doc. You do mention quite a number of things. You talk about recruitment and promotion as one of the challenges, crowd control issues, and the fact that the police are, have this habit of perhaps lying and falsifying information to protect, their own, and many others. Clearly indicating a certain, if you like, a systemic challenge that we have. I mentioned earlier on the show that the IGP keeps talking about a certain transformation agenda. Are you aware of what this agenda is about? And indeed, how do we deal with this systemic challenge? Because it seems we are not making a headway with the situation.
Well, look, this transformation agenda, which is supposed to cost 800 million Ghana cedis of our taxpayers' money, was presented about 6 months ago or so with great fanfare at the Alisa Hotel. You cannot and you must not transform an institution that has institutional structural challenges that goes to the core of its mandate. Now, what are you transforming? It is the ability to shoot people in cold blood? Is it the ability to falsify official documents? To hide documents? Okay? Or you are transforming the manner in which the way recruitment and promotions are done becomes more transparent and responsive? Okay? Now, the transformation agenda is very useful to be able to give us a 21st century police service. But it is more hot air than substance. Because we see a service that since the 1950s, if you read all the commission, the inquiry reports, mentions the same things over time until we had the Okudzeto reports in, I think, 2006, where there was this crowd control problem at Accra Stadium. So the service itself, much as we love it, is incapable of looking at itself critically and saying, what should we do? Let me mention two oversight institutions that are not performing well.
Right.
One relates to the Police Council. That should give it the grander strategic direction and vision that consistently has failed to do that. The second is Parliament as a whole, but particularly the Parliamentary Committee on Defence and Interior. If you read Act 350 of 1970, that transformed the Ghana Police Force into a Ghana Police Service and establishes the Police Council. The Council must submit to Parliament on an annual basis a full report of the performance of the Ghana Police Service. Based on what I know, I think Parliament over time has requested for this report only once, and the service has never bothered to submit the report. So we are seeing multiple levels of failure at which oversight institutions ought to have intervened to say, look, this is a service that is not fit for purpose in the 21st century. And I think probably we need a much wider public discourse about the type of police service that we want, tinkering with our taxpayers' money for a transformation agenda that is nowhere near transforming or dealing with the real problems of the service does not help anybody.
Very well. Now, Doc, if the police, by virtue of how they are structured, as it were, are not able to check themselves, and as you put it, the oversight institutions are also failing, then what is the way out?
Well, look, people always ask me this question, what is the way out? You've got to ask the people who are in those institutions. You see, I am only an analyst. Yes, I can make some suggestions, but of course it will be discarded with the contempt that people in, policy circles always do. Look, I've said this and I'll repeat. The Ghana Police Service is a civil institution, and probably the time has come for us to consider whether we need somebody who is a world-class business leader from Ghana, who has 10 big institutions around, give this person a performance-based contract and say, transform the service for us.
Very well. Now, Doc, you talked about the police council as one of the institutions which perhaps are not doing their job as much as they should. But I'm looking at the membership, as it were, of the council. And I'm wondering if perhaps the way the council itself is constituted is perhaps one of the reasons why we are struggling, because you do realize that they are members of the police service on that council. And so if, according to your submissions, the police are unable to check themselves, well, they find themselves on this, as it were, oversight institution there as well. Then you do have some retired police person also on there as well. So in as much as we're trying to create this oversight or external, entity to overlook or supervise the services or the service, you still find elements of the Ghana Police Service in this council as well. Is that perhaps an issue we need to look at?
Well, that may be one of it. But the question is that what do we want the council to do? Now, about a year and a half ago, I spent some time doing some research, which is available online. But the service itself and its membership were totally dismissive of the council and its capacity and capabilities to bring about the reform and the transformation that the rank and file of the service is looking for. Look, the council was contemptuously described as a dismissals and promotions council. Look, I can raise through for you multiple instances where people who were due for promotion were jumped over, where those who were not fit for purpose were promoted. Look, we need a technically savvy, independent team of experts to sit down and take all the commission reports from 1951 until 1986, like 2006, and say that, look, these particular types of problems recur, and they are recurring in 2018. What are the interventions that need being undertaken so that we have a service that is responsive to the needs of the 21st century society? And I've cited for you the failure of police intelligence during the news crisis, the disastrous interventions in Adentam, once more confirming the inability to do effective crowd control. We've seen it in Hafasini sometime in March this year. So look, this is not a service that is demonstrating an understanding and a capability of responding to the challenges that an increasing population, expanding public spaces or urban spaces. This is not a service that is demonstrating that it is capable, it is on top, and can allow us to live peacefully and to protect our property. Now, this morning, I think my friends in the service will say, oh, Kwesi is being a little bit tough. But this is tough love. I'm saying what I'm saying because I truly do love the service.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we tell the truth. Look, if you get to the Brewer checkpoint, probably it is the worst checkpoint in this country. Abusive of passengers in vehicles, extorting money consistently in the mornings, in the afternoons, at night. Okay, I've mentioned this over and over again. The question really is, where do these extorted monies go to? Because people have put videos on YouTube, people have complained, they brought the evidence, nothing seems to change. Okay, so we do need to tinker with these problems in an ad hoc manner. We need a holistic approach in which police accountability to citizens of this country is enhanced and people can go about their business peacefully.
Very well.
Right
Thank you.
Now, service that is facing a challenge, a crisis of credibility.
Thank you so much, Dr. Enin. We'll end it here, but we'll be getting back to you later on in the show when we discuss the Dagbon chieftaincy issue and the roadmap that was presented to the president this week. Thank you so much, Dr. Enin. He is with the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. So quite a lot to take in there from Dr. Kwesi Enin. A number of things. I think I will come to you, Mr. Yel Yang here. The constitution of the council. He's talking about, the police itself not being able to check itself or regulate or, as it were, lead that transformation. Then there are the oversight entities which are also failing. I mean, we find ourselves in a very difficult situation, the cul-de-sac, as it were, but we need to get things right. But one thing that struck me, among many others, was the fact that he talked about the command system being an issue. And in respect of the Manson Quanta incident, which we're looking at today, I heard a retired police officer who was talking about the fact that he doesn't understand why it is the officers on the ground who have been, who are being recommended for interdiction. He thinks that the commanders who gave them the command should also perhaps be in there as well, as it were, because they didn't act on their own. Unless it is established that they acted on their own, then that sort of responsibility will be given to them personally. What do you think of that?
Thank you so much. And indeed, the point, the first one, that's the composition of the council.
Yes, the council.
I think that basically, like Doc indicated, is problematic, because apart from the two retired persons, and another, the rest are appointed and are representations of government.
They are they are certain ex-official positions, yeah.
Yes, you have the two other persons appointed by the president, you have the vice president who is there, you have the IGP, you have the minister for the internal affairs,
Attorney General.
And Attorney General and all of those. So all of them, so to speak, are coming from the side of the government, apart from these other, So the question is, how do we, and like he indicated, what are their roles, in the council?
Well, the Constitution, states the functions of the Police Council clearly in Article 203, that the Police Council shall advise the President on matters of policy relating to internal security, including the role of the police service, budgeting and finance, administration, and the promotion of officers above the rank of Assistant Commissioner of Police. It turns out, according to Dr. Enin, that they seem to be interested in the last one, which is the promotion of officers, or that's how they've come to be known, what they've come to be known for.
Exactly, and that's where there is a kind of a problem, which needs a bit of checks. Now, coming to the issue that you talked about, very often when incidences occur, then we go direct to those who are directly involved. And as if there is a cloak, on those who have probably duted, other people to the ground, or deploy them. Now, if a police officer is on the ground, that police officer has been requested by someone who is a superior to be there. And the person's duties are clearly spelled out. Now, it presupposes that the police officer on the ground, has enough capability to perform the functions that he or she is on the ground to perform. Now, an incident occurs, you need to go through the channel and then find out, did someone do his or her work right? And so if there is someone to be culpable, then it should also go through that process. So you don't just leave it there, because oversight is not just about other external bodies that should be doing so.
Right, within,
but
within
the service itself.
Right.
The Police Intelligence and Professional Service Bureau has instituted a number of reforms. We are not really seeing the reforms that are okay.
PIPS itself is under serious, I don't know what word to use at this point, but yes, it has its own challenges. Well, quickly, Mr. Foley, the issue about the command, structure, and the fact that in this, the committee's work, we seem not to have heard anything about, that command structure, and it's coming up that these men perhaps acted on instructions, yes. Unless, of course, maybe they found out that they acted on their own volition. That would be something else. But your perspective on that kind of command system we have, which more often than not is not questioned when these things do come up.
Yes, definitely command responsibility. If you look at the Post-Electoral Violence Commission report in Kenya in 2007, yes, following the post-electoral violence, the questions of command responsibility raised, even to the highest level. General Ali Hussein, who was Inspector General of Police, and he was a military general. Ali Hussein was reassigned. Of course, that was a political solution to the matter, and was teased. He was sent to the post office. The people then started calling him Postmaster General instead of a military general. But there were sanctions for officers who had given instructions. So definitely command responsibility is a factor. When Dr. Enin was speaking, and we've all worked with him, so I believe we are very familiar with the points he's raising. Yes. Does the service even understand where Ghana is going now? Take the whole national socio-economic transformational agenda. Take a simple case of a bank guard, a police officer on bank duty. I ask, the nature of cyber crime and financial crime nowadays, should he even be carrying a gun? I mean, robbery in a bank could be cyber. If it is happening in real time, he should be the first port of call, I assume. Does the officer even have the acumen to be able to go in and override the bank's computer system, for instance? These are, we may think it's a joke, but look at EcoBank, StanChart. Yes, look at what they are doing. FNB. Does the service understand that transformational agenda and their role therein? And that's why I'll come back to the Constitution and even the structure of the police council and its functions. Yes, reading the Constitution, it looks like hiring and firing. Advice on policy matters. Let's look at the skill set in the council. And it needs to change. I will go back after this. It hadn't struck me to look at the Constitutional Review Commission report and see what was said in respect of the police council. But crime has changed. Policing has changed. And I think, in fairness to the security service, there have been some transformational moves in the military. You often don't hear about the military, but I think we may have to take a cue from them. How come our soldiers seem to perform so well, even in situations when they come out and the responses, but not the police? I get a sense that we may need to borrow a leaf from some of our other colleagues in the security service. If you ask me. With the military, but definitely yes, command responsibility is something that features strongly in international criminal law, international human rights law. You have to get the people who gave the instructions. Yeah, true. Prof, I definitely, maybe if you want to touch on the command issue, fine, but I'm looking at the communication to the public in respect of the government's recommendation for interdiction. And the response we had from the police, I believe the director, the Police Public Affairs Directorate, ACP David Declue, well, as of the 20th November, I don't know what has happened since, but as of the 20th November 2018, the police themselves
hadn't heard or hadn't received any communication of sorts from the government. Yet we had this information out there. People have had cause to raise issues about that kind of, you know, if you like, coordination between government and the police regarding this call for recommendation. Do you find it striking or curious that it seems to have been missed?
Well, nothing comes to me as curious
anymore.
From where I sit and from what I do. I've acted as a friend and consultant to the police in the past, and the constitutional review issue that was raised over here. I worked with the top hierarchy in presenting what the police thought should be done for the institution. But I still believe, why I say that it doesn't come to me as anything surprising or curious, is the very fact that I still maintain everything that Kwesi said. I mean, we meet a lot. Everything Kwesi said is correct. But institutional failure has much to do with a systemic order. I've always said it, that it is Ghana which is failing, and there's no institutionalism in Ghana because of the politicization of everything. You talk about communication, the police will be waiting for what government wants us to hear. Every institution that needs to be treated as such as an institution and dealt with, we always want to hear what the politician wants us to hear. It's been all over from time immemorial. And that is one sad aspect we are not looking at. Put all past this. I mean, let's scrape off the police service and let's start from the ordinary corporal or whatever it is, or Bobno rank, all the way to the IGP. Put new people there. These same things will happen if the system is the same. I mean, a society gets the type of institution it wants because of the nature of the society. I'm saying the Ghanaian society is sick. Everything is politicized. Recruitment, everything. The type of vehicles the police want to buy, the politician tells them. The type of ammunition, where to purchase them, the politician is the one who tells them. Everything is encapsulated in the political thinking of the country. That's one basic thing we must also understand. 21st century Ghana, and we have that type of police. Kwesi was talking about the various commissions, reports. And I've read, there are a lot of them, which talks about the nature, the need to change according to what society is today. Like my brother is talking about cyber. Come on, people are standing by the roadside, more important to see who jumped the red or who doesn't jump, and who gives what, instead of being trained in cyber security today. Instead of being trained as to how to, look for Act 350 and that sort of thing. He's talking about prevention. First thing is the prevention of crime. Is the police looking for preventing the crime before it happens, or they want it to happen so that they can?
Yeah.
These are things we need. It's a systemic issue, and Kwesi mentioned that we need to look at it holistically. I believe that holistic attitude is not only the institution called the police, but the whole gamut of Ghanaian society, where indiscipline is creeping in every fabric of our society just because of politics, where everything is politicized to the extent that institutions are not independent in working the way they can transform themselves into modernity. I'm worried about that. So I'm not surprised that government has not spoken, the police want to, or something is doctored before it comes out and that kind of thing, but because that's what society is. Very
well. We'll be coming to look at other aspects of this, but let me take some messages from our viewers and listeners. This one is coming in. He says, "Good morning, Abna. I'm not surprised by the behavior of the Ghana police until we stop the partisan nepotism and favoritism in our recruitment in Ghana. Such amateur attitudes will continue in all departments in the country." This one also says, "If you want to experience the real nature of the Ghanaian police, have an encounter with them. The society has become lawless because when you want to follow due process in this country, you will rather be frustrated and be seen as not normal." Felix Ayele from the Ghana Technology University College says, "We are sick and tired of the so-called police in this country. The Manson Quanta incident shows clearly the incompetence that is brewing in the police administrative hierarchy. If the police really wants to fire their arms, the United States, British and the Canadian Army are battling with terrorists in Afghanistan, Pakistan and Syria. the Ghana police should join them, fight this evil-minded terrorists. They should stop the assaults on innocent Ghanaians. Okay, that's from Felix. This one says, Ayu Farouk says, good morning to you, Abner, to your panelists. Indeed, the police is gradually losing its credibility, abusing their powers on the innocent people. The IGP must wake up. Prosper in Abor says, police brutality will continue since the politicians are interfering with the recruitment process, where they hold the unqualified person's hands into the service. Obviously, these sentiments are all around police, political interference, the lack of professionalism, and all those things are being raised here. We'll look into those aspects deeper when we come back from a short break. We'll see you shortly. Welcome back. This is The Key Point on TV3, also live on 3FM 92.7 and online at 3news.com. Also on our Facebook page, TV3 Ghana. We're looking at policing in Ghana and the dangers that poses to citizens pretty much on a daily basis. Welcome back. So I think we went on the break at the point where, Prof, you were talking about the fact that it's a systemic thing we need to change holistically, a total overhaul and all of that. Now, the IGP has, I think I read somewhere that he was talking about the fact that perhaps policing would change if we got in better educated people. So they're looking at a possible introduction of the first degree as the minimum qualification for that. Do you think that would bring about any change?
I think that basically is not the qualification, like Prof indicated, it's the structure. You recruit a police officer who is a first degree holder into the service. The person is detailed to be on the road like an MTTU person. The person, the other people who are already there, have the tendency to influence the orientation of this person, So it's a culture, and until we begin to look at it in a manner that every offense within the service, that is not in tandem with law, then should be reacted to according to law, Otherwise, you change the people, change everyone, and put them back.
New one in old skin.
New one in old skin. You will see that they will begin to operate and work in the same manner. So I think that it's not just the individuals in the system. Yes, of course, some individuals can change processes, and make sure that there is the orientation, a new orientation that can be contemporary, and seen to be in line with human rights, international standards in terms of operations. But we need to begin to look at, I always say that if the police service is seen to be working as expected by law, there would not be corruption in this country, because they would arrest whoever is responsible. But, we have this perception that even that service itself has problems. And Doc was talking about the extortions on the road, and even how they, they approach us civilians on the road and so many other things. And it's like their implementation or enforcement of the law is like, wait, let this person commit the offense, then we get them. Then you say, like, hooray, we've gotten you. Rather than looking at how
that
do
whole
we
mindset needs to be
that's the mindset. So
changed,
how do we, rather than looking at one of the first responsibilities of the police, which is the prevention aspect, so we prevent, and then also that which is education is always being missed out. Now, someone commits a less offense, then is instead of educating, okay, for instance, your insurance has expired. Now, within 5 days, okay, make sure you get it done. The next time they arrest you or I get you, you are going to be, I mean, that is not done. They say, okay.
They wouldn't do that.
They wouldn't do that.
They will ask you to follow them to the police station.
And the West is take your license or something. So I think it's the culture and the structure of the operations of the police service that needs a change.
Very well. So a total overhaul, like I said earlier. Now, Prof, when these incidents, like we're talking about, happen, I mean, people would expect that there'll be a certain sanction of, you know, the personnel involved. But more often than not, I think there's a perception that, well, they always let off the hook. Maybe it happens, we don't hear about it,
That's right.
but that's the perception. To the extent that, like I said earlier, the PIPs, you know, people are looking at it and saying perhaps the PIPs is not even doing a good job. So against that background, there are those who are calling for perhaps an independent police complaints commission of sorts, so that complaints are lodged with them, they bring some independence to bear, and so it's expected that maybe that would, you know, bring about certain changes to how these incidents are dealt with when, for instance, when the Manson Quanta situation, for instance, happens. Do you share that? Do you think that would help?
Personally, I do not share that. We are always quick at trying to fix problems by organizing more institutional structures. If those things that make the previous structure not work are still prevalent, there's no way anything is going to change. But I see a situation where the police service as it is seriously divorced from the people. Good policing is involving the people as part of the police service,
right.
Police intelligence and everything. In my recommendation that I earlier spoke about, I was talking about avoiding barracksing. We went all the way to Korea to look for money, STX, to try and see if we can put the police close to Pram Pram so that every morning we bus them to the cities to... that's wrong in 21st century policing. And we were suggesting that the police must stay among the people, be their friends, be part of it. It's like he's you in uniform. That's all.
But they are beating us.
It's because there is that gap. That's what I'm talking about. When that gap is sealed, policing will be better. Secondly, if I see the police as a friend, as somebody who protects me, and he needs me in the protection, it's a dual way, then anything that is untoward, I can let him know. And he will work better because he's also part of me. That gap is what brought about this community policing, which we are not also perfecting. The communication gap is also there. A lot of the times, things happen like this has happened. Then you in the media always hype the thing, and then we don't hear anything about it anymore. Because you don't probe further, you don't go for the results. And the police themselves or the institutions that we're working with don't also come out from their PR section to tell us the end result of whatever it is. There is that gap that make people suspect that, after all, Drew Prosi and one kind of. And the police are also, from their angle, complain that when they are able to get the right culprits, because of the system, they are let loose. And it also encourages them to do most of those
so
things.
So that argument about, or that discourse about political interference is also there.
Exactly.
But yes, still on the independent commission, Prof, I hear you on the point that we need to change, you know, the fundamentals in order to get things right. But even as we try to change the fundamentals, we still have to deal with the situation, because these Manson Quanta situations do occur. And I mean, I don't think that will be the last. Definitely, until things change for the better, we will see such things recur. So people are then calling for, until we change that, let's have this independent thing, because the perception is real. I want to believe that they protect themselves.
Yes. Let's have a scenario where this institution has come. I don't know the composition as you were perceiving, but if there is this institution, which also does not have the necessary tunnels to be able to come out with anything, we are back to square one. I'm saying there are enough rules, regulations, and oversight structures that are there to bring about the result that you are talking about. Why can't we use that? And again, remember, the Ghanaian society is also that very gullible, that very, ignorant about things.
Are we?
Yeah, we are.
I thought we had.
There are a lot of things we could pursue and pursue and pursue until we get it, as ordinary citizens. No.
Is it a case of learned helplessness? We've realized that. I mean, you can push, but nothing happens so well.
Maybe somehow. But if you are interested in a certain case, you have every right to pursue this as a journalist. What happened to this case? What happened to this officer who was interdicted? What happens? There was a case I was following, only from the papers. It's not of great interest, but I wanted the result about this cocaine that were missing from the police headquarters and the woman that was involved, the interdiction of a certain police officer. I think it died out quietly that way. I don't know what happened to that case, but I thought the public should have been informed about the end of that case.
The police service has a public relations directorate, don't they?
That's what I said.
I get it, but when it's, I mean, that responsibility is being put on the media, and I think then it becomes a bit...
No, I'm not saying it should be put on the media, but it's the media's interest.
And in fact, everybody's
you whet
interest.
my appetite by telling me that the bars that I see at the police strong room have been broken, and you don't tell me. Anyway, so I believe that, yes, we can have, we are quick in Africa. We are very quick in setting up new structures. Those new structures become even a burden on the old structures. I believe there are enough laws, rules, regulations. Somebody must see to it that these things work, and we'll get the results.
Very well. But Mr. Foley, you have worked, you've done some studies or work on police brutalities, right? What are some of the striking findings that you've come across, and perhaps have you been able to prefer any solutions to these things? I mean, aside what we've been talking about so far.
Right. So there are some star countries. Unfortunately, yes, we have to talk about them. Guatemala, the United States of America, Brazil, come out tops as rogue countries when it comes to the worst forms of police brutality, which would be killing. And some of the figures, in the thousands. In the thousands. In the United States, for example, it is reputed that 1,000 people die at the hands of police officers needlessly. In Ghana, we haven't had sort of structured documentation of police brutality. We often get a lot from the media. So we've been collecting stories since 2006 from the Dansuman and Kotobabi shootings. And
so you don't even get that information from the police? You depend on
you
media
would not,
reports?
Yes, a lot of
that
it
in
comes
itself
from,
is problematic,
clearly,
because they
reports.
don't have targets they're working with then. So we had this much this year, next year let's see to reducing it to this level.
Sorry
all
for
those
my
things.
intervention. Are you expecting the police to say that this act of ours is a police brutality and therefore we are keeping track of?
That's why they have the council there, for instance.
But even
you expecting from them?
Yes.
They want in for interventions and for the protection of property and life. And you want them to call that police
Maybe I'm living on
brutality?
another planet.
Have you forgotten about the one in which we were told that the bullet was not a bullet, but it's tomatoes?
but then, of all these countries I've mentioned, if you take the United States, for instance, why did Black Lives Matter come up? Because the police would not volunteer that information. But per the rules, if you look at the service instructions of the police, every issuance of a weapon, its use, whether use or non-use, has to be recorded.
Right.
So every incident, so the police would have, if they went according to the service instructions, they would have the documentation, but would not readily share with you. What have been the responses? Yes, I've been deeply involved in the work around the independent complaints commission and all of that, but we are hastening very slowly. One, for the reason that Prof talks about, setting up new institutions. All the key stakeholders, there's a meeting with the Police Council this week with the Civil Society Coalition working on this. But they've met all the other bodies, Interior, the police themselves say, yes, we understand, have some mechanism. But I also working on this in terms of self-check, have been asking, how do we guarantee independence? Because you can go and bring another body. And in Ghana, we have a tendency to always come up with a new idea and not go to the problem. When you ask about educational background, for instance, I work in a university. Sad to say, I teach criminal law. And I have students trying to cheat in criminal law exam. And I tell them, we have a fundamental problem. If you are trying to cheat law student in a criminal law test, then there is something wrong up here.
Prof said the society
yes, because that's so. I agree with Prof 100%. The society is sick, because if a lawyer in training is attempting to cheat in no other paper than criminal law, then there's a fundamental problem with the society. So no amount of first degree
would change
it. Yes, until
that
you
was
go
a practical way of learning criminal
law. So until you go and change the value system, bring whatever measures, it won't change.
Very well. We need to take a break, but let me take some messages before that. This one is coming in from Hussein Al Hassan. He says, but what do you expect in a service where a beauty of a parade determines your pass out and not purely academics? This is, okay, you're an ex-police officer. That's great. I reported a criminal to the police, and in my presence, they called a party chairman as to whether they should arrest or leave him. I was angry that day, and I vowed never to report to the police again. Okay, this one says, police brutalities on civilians, civilian attacks on police personnel. You're asking. I think that's a good question. Why do police officers carry weapons to public gatherings? I thought they were peace officers and should portray peace in their appearance. The possession of weapons is a sign of combat readiness. Is it therefore any wonder when police officers are seen, quote unquote, combating innocent civilians, or rather intimidated civilians settling scores with the combatants? Someone should tell the police that they can't maintain peace in combat gear, and civilians will continue to attack them in defense or as reprisals. Social psychology may be helpful in training the police. He said, hashtag stop police civilian attacks. Derek in Kumasi says, please tell Prof that he has a great point, but let's ask ourselves the question, how would the initiatives be taken into action? Last one here says, everybody is lambasting the police for their ill actions, but nobody cares about their welfare. If you have been a victim of robbery before, you will appreciate the police. That's this one says, Tema Watchman from Tema Community 2. We'll pull the brakes on the messages here and take a quick break. When we come back, we wrap up on this conversation and look at the Dagbon chieftaincy dispute and how the roadmap presented by the Committee of Eminent Chiefs would bring lasting peace to that area. See you shortly. This is the Key Points live on TV3, also live on 3FM 92.7 and online at 3news.com. Also on our Facebook page, TV3 Ghana. We're bringing the discussion on policing in Ghana to a close. I'll go around for the panel's concluding remarks, and I'll start with you, Mr. Yeo Yang. Your concluding remarks. I know you found one of the texts or the WhatsApp messages coming through quite instructive in respect of the pressures on the police and how they're doing. If you would share.
Yeah, thank you. I think the texter indicated that it's like we are just lambasting the police, and then we are not looking at the challenges that confront them as an institution. I think. Yes, he is right, and but what we're saying is that does not give them enough room to overreact to situations, and that's why we are calling for a strengthening of their own operations. For instance, if you look at the what do you call it? The police-civilian ratio is woefully inadequate. The UN standard is 1 to 500. Now we have 1 to over 2,000. That is very interesting.
Problematic, yeah.
It's problematic. I also think that basically, if you look at we're talking about interference in the service. Now that interference for me seemed to be enshrined even in our own constitution. If you look at even we're talking about the composition of the council, and the IGP is appointed. Now, if the IGP is appointed, it means almost every other person down the line is appointed because there is authority coming from the president, And so if I'm a police officer who wants to be independent in terms of my job, then I should be careful, because, and especially if you see transfers here and there, which the police service and say many of them complain about. It's like that transfer is punitive. I want to punish you because you haven't acted right. Or someone probably has interfered in the process and say, okay, this person should be moved there. So they themselves are working in a timid position, I should say, So it's something that we need to look at right at that level, And then we're talking about the recruitment, and Prof was talking about the society. Now, and I earlier mentioned that we need to look at the role of other institutions in the recruitment process. we are not saying that we want to interfere in the operations of the institution that is mandated to do its own work. But what we are saying is that, I mean, could it be transparent? And for instance, what background checks do they do on the individuals who submit applications to be recruited? You know, these are things that they need to go an extra mile in order that they can have at least some benefit of the doubt of a certain caliber of individuals who are being recruited into the service.
Thank you. Prof, your concluding remarks on this?
Well, I think I personally have been a friend of the police from time immemorial. Some of the IGPs were my mates and whatnot. So what the police does, what their problems are, and that sort of thing, I know. I should say that we have about one of the finest police services on the subcontinent. We have all kinds of police. Ghana in miniature, all kinds of professions are in the police. But they are working within a certain structure or system which makes it difficult for us to appreciate policing in its sense. So they have problems. But their problems unfortunately translate into what we are talking about now. And that's what we should be looking at. Personally, I would suggest that active police who go on actions, should wear body cameras.
Yes. That's
I've suggested this thing before and talked to ministers before. This particular we haven't discussed. But I think if they wear body cameras, that would be the first check on their behavior. They'll have that restraint in trying to react impulsively. When such things happen, they know they would be exposed, and it would be an individual kind of responsibility. So I would strongly suggest that people who are sent out for action must wear body cameras.
Very well. We need to look at how that can happen, because we're looking at situations where we are told bulletproof. We don't even have bulletproof jackets and all.
It's a small. It can be like a button.
That's true. Yeah,
but
but
just like a button, or it can be put into the.
I'm looking at the cost of it.
Yes.
Not the
They are not very
size. Well,
You know, I mean, somewhere in the north, you know, even military were retreating aggression from civilians because they did not have the bulletproof jackets at the time. In fact, we intervened seriously, and even the ground, they will say, no, it's not true. But we happened to say, okay, we will pass this information to Accra, and it happened. Now they deployed, you know, and that worked. Because and that's why we're talking about the life of the police themselves. You know, they are individuals like us, and as we always say, they are civilians in a uniform. You know,
they belong to families.
Yes, they have families.
And,
they have their own lives, which you know. So basically, I mean, it's an important thing that needs to
be addressed very well. Quickly, Mr. Foley, quickly, and then we go into the Dagbon issue.
First, to government. You have a police service that has historical baggage, serious historical baggage that divorces it from the society. I wouldn't say move forward. Pause and reflect. And stop for once. Listen to the police themselves. They have concerns. Give them the space to talk to you from their hearts. There are very good officers and men there who will give you ideas. They've gone on courses, they've traveled, they know what is good. They need the freedom to speak and act, and we'll see transformation.
Very well. There are good officers there, men and women.
Yes.
In there. So we'll be moving on to look at the Dagbon chieftaincy dispute and the progress that has been made by the Committee of Eminent Chiefs led by the Otumfuo Asantehene. And this week, the roadmap was presented to the president at the presidency. Let's take a listen to the Asantehene and then the president in respect of this matter. And then we return to the panel here for their perspectives.
The funeral of Na Yakubu and Na Muhammadu Abdullahi should be performed from the 14th of December to the 28th of December this year. So they have a 1-week respite, and the next will be from the 4th to the 9th, another 4th to the 19th or 18th of January. Then the Andanis would also perform. On that very day, the last day, the Friday, there are 4 recognized elders who have to sit in seclusion, and then they would have to do their oracles to choose a new Yana. And that starts from the very Friday that the funeral of Na Yakubu Andane finishes. So we hopefully believe so that after the 18th, The oracles will start, and God willing, within the few days, we shall have a new Yana.
This is the misinformation that is being peddled by our political opponents.
Very well. So clearly, the president wasn't speaking in respect of the Dagbon chieftaincy issue. We had the wrong insight there. We'll get to the correct one and then have that played. But okay, let's take a listen to the president in that. I hear it's ready. Let's listen to him.
The Dagbon people must themselves also be willing to give peace a chance. And it is attainable, in my view, if there is a will and a readiness to compromise. Not many Ghanaians know that Abudu and Andani are not clans. They are names of brothers of the same father and are now used as terms to define the two main gates that ascend to the Dagbon scale. For an ethnic group with no clan cleavages, I believe that they have the best opportunity to mend fences, restore the dignity of their kingdom, and ensure the forward march of Dagbon.
Yes, so that was the president speaking when the Committee of Eminent Chiefs, led by Dr. Mfasantini, presented their roadmap for lasting peace in the Dagbon traditional area this week at the presidency. Prof, I'll start with you here. After 16 years or so, we have this roadmap presented. It's worth celebrating because it seems we have made some major inroads with this. But the question lingering on people's minds is whether or not this will really bring about the lasting peace. I mean, we'll go into the issues some more, but generally, your initial thoughts on this, will this roadmap really help us bring about, given what has happened subsequent to the presentation of the roadmap? Personally,
if you read my article yesterday in the Times, you would say I was not being pessimistic, but I was sounding a note of caution that we shouldn't say hooray yet. It's not yet uhuru.
Right.
But the main point is that we have had several roadmaps in the past before. One of them being the Supreme Court decision, which everybody thought conflict always ends with some point, especially at the Supreme Court. But what happened? And even this one, subsequent to that, but I think this one looks neater, easier, acceptable, and you could see conclusions. What should be done and what conclusions we are expecting.
You say acceptable, but not all parties.
Yes, acceptable in the sense that you could see that there is a clear way of doing the thing. In the past, we would see that we should do this, and then people were talking mostly about getting the justice before the peace and things like that. When you begin in conflict situations to put spokes, to put conditions, you get nowhere. Because the whole thing is about giving and taking and jojoing, compromising, you know. I believe Otumfuo and his lieutenants have done a good job. It's unfortunate that when you go into the details, you would realize that at any point in time, some kind of negative variables would want to rear their head and making it impossible for things to be done. And there are people who benefit from the status quo. And that's what we need to watch. My thinking is that, yes, this is a very positive thing, and that the whole of Ghana, and especially Dagbon, as the president rightly put it, they are not tribes. They are not clans. The gates they were talking about, yes, were created because of brotherhood. My name is Abudu, my name is Andani, from the same, but this is my gate, and it happens in most of these situations elsewhere in the world. And that this roadmap looks straight. The core problem about the current situation is the non-performance of the funeral rites of either of them. First was the Abudu, until Yana Andani was killed. It was the most sore of the problems.
It's at the heart of the whole issue.
It's the heart of the whole issue. that at any time after the fire festival, then one side will get up. We won't allow you in power to celebrate your festival. And so you would see that every year it's after the fire festival that we have a problem. Now, if there were a situation where we were able to celebrate the funeral of the Abudu who died, Yana Abudu Abdullahi who died earlier, then this thing would not have happened. Now that both are dead, and that the cultural and traditional thing is to have the funeral, and the traditional thing was when the funeral is done, the palace is vacated. Then the next one, the palace is also vacated. Then the soothsayers come together and bring a new Yana. I think it's a straightforward thing. If and only if what we are seeing would not generate into a problem of who the Yana even is going to be.
Very let's take a listen to Otumfuo when he was talking about the fact that some, parties to this whole issue are, as it were, pursuing a certain parochial interest at the expense of the whole Dagbon traditional area. Let's take a listen to that, and then I come to Mr. Foley for your perspective on that.
The bone of contention has been whether regions can play a part in the funeral of Yana. And that also has come up. In fact, after our meeting, there were issues raised by the representatives of the regent of Dagbon, and then the Kugana. I don't know where they were. Are the representatives of Kugana here? Because I asked for them to come. Prime Minister, you didn't get them? Or they refused to come?
He said that he's sick.
They said they are sick. All right. And he said he was sick, so he was not coming. Okay. Because after this, we will have to take very serious decisions on those people, because I cannot countenance anyone holding Dagbon to ransom or this country to ransom because of their personal issue.
So that was an instructive moment in that whole interaction where the Kugana was called upon but wasn't there. And yes, clearly from the Otumfuo's demeanor.
Frustration.
Exactly. And so in view of that, that's why I asked earlier on, are we likely to see peace from this roadmap? Clearly, because you see some, withdrawals, as it were, of non-participation in this whole process. Mr. Foley, your perspective on that?
Yes,
the Kugana said he was sick, so he couldn't be there.
The focus on peace, the event, instead of peace, the process. And in 2015, I was privileged to be seconded to the Obasanjo Commission of Inquiry, the African Union Commission that looked at South Sudan. Yes. And again, we met the same things. And still, we have some kind of roadmap from the AU, but it's not happening. So I share the same sentiments as Prof. This looks better. But if we focus on peace, the event, then we give these characters the opportunity to stall it. But peace, the process. And that peace process comes sometimes with telling people to the face that, please, we don't need you to stall this process. I think what the Asante was hitting at is in the right direction. We can give this one a chance. And yes, the funerals have been the sore point. Let's have the funerals, but also bring people along, not to look at the end being the event, but the walk. Yes, and I think from there we'll be getting some peace in Dagbon.
Right, still staying with this whole issue about, certain persons staying away or, not being actively involved. Is it a case that they were not consulted as much as they would want to, or they are just being adamant, like the, Otumfuo puts it, perhaps trying to hold the whole state to ransom for their, parochial interests, as it were? Do you see it that way?
The consultations they've been talking about that we've not been consulted. Fine, for consultation to happen, you need the space. The spaces were set. You've had the eminent chiefs. I mean, all the processes we've gone through in the past. So it's a question of, do you find it inadequate, or you yourself have a problem? I think the spaces have been adequate, and hence the concern that it is an individual choice. So for me, it's really the question of the individuals.
But can we move on without bringing everyone in?
In actual fact, Otumfuo would not be the person who would come to say, I have a conclusion, when he knows very well that there are other residual matters that have not been dealt
with, right?
And in negotiations, you always have hard bargainers. You have people uncompromising for uncompromising sake. These are, and you have also people who are just negative
for that sake.
For that sake. But he's been able to navigate all these until this conclusion. And so if there were no conclusions, and as he pointed out, he asked the Kugana, the Bolina, and all others to be there. The last minute somebody says, I'm sick, doesn't mean he doesn't agree to the conclusions.
Okay.
That's how I take it.
Right. He just wasn't present.
He just wasn't
there, but
exactly. But those who refused, even after all has been done, to come is my worry. Because that and their followers, could cause some kind of bad viruses to be put in the process and in negotiations. Because, look, conflict is endemic. Yes. And like my brother said, it's a process, not an event.
Right.
And as a process, it's an undying kind of thing. We need to guide this process until we transform the conflict into something. So generations unborn would not come to inherit this conflict, but a different kind of conflict.
Right.
It could be a football conflict, because then you have an Andani Abudu family in one football team. So they wouldn't be fighting Andani Abudu again. They will be fighting. So you transform the conflict, kind of. Right. So the situation that has arisen, that people are making press conferences to say we were not involved, is a little worrying. But we can still
and
be
that they will
working
resist any attempt to perform the funeral of the late Muhammadu Abdullahi, because he died as a private person. And you would think that issue about whether or not Muhammadu Abdullahi died as a Yana or not has been determined. That's what
it has been determined already.
So
it has already
when
been
you have these things coming up again, you wonder exactly
but that's what the intention said clearly. He wouldn't allow, because the point, that one has been determined.
Yes.
It is not up to anybody to now redetermine the whole thing.
Right.
He died as a Yana. By their own tradition, a Yana is not
skinned.
And so he died as a Yana. And that has been the core of the problem. Let's remove that problem.
Right. Mr. Yoyang, I mean, listening to this whole argument, 16 years, I mean, it's been a long while. And we know this whole dispute has, how it's impacted, the area and surrounding areas as well. Moving forward, the roadmap indicates the timelines, if you like, for the funerals to be celebrated or commemorated, and these things that are coming up from the other side. What do you make of all of this happening?
Yeah, thank you. I think that, like Prof. and Doc indicated, the document as we see and the commentary from the two key persons, the president and then Otumfuo, seem to be encouraging, because 16 years, I have been involved since 2002. Indeed, for one of the instances, I was nearly killed in a container, because they were celebrating a year of the death of the former chief, king, and then it mistook me for, so it has been problematic. Okay. What I think, sensing from the ground and the processes that have taken place, is that there is some kind of apathy, towards this process, and there is fatigue, and so you would understand the frustration of Otumfuo. I have invited these people, I will not countenance, so, but the insistence is that we need to move forward, Certain things have happened. Now, are we thinking of a reconciliation process, or we are thinking of where we want to justify what is what? And like Doc indicated, it's a process, it's not an event. Now, a process means that we have come from a certain journey, distance to where we are now. And if you talk about the consultations, some people would always come up with issues here and there. They will have dissenting views. They will still raise concerns, even along the process, that everyone is seen, to be so, let me say, accepting, that process, accepting the document, people will still always raise concerns because we have, individuals who make themselves relevant through certain processes and certain situations, and very often such people will find it very difficult to let go that relevance that they have in society, And so I think that we need to move forward and think about reconciliation. Yes, this is the document we want to work with. Now, for me, I think that in implementing it, we need to hasten to slow. I mean, or whatever they say.
Hasten slowly.
Yeah, hasten slowly, because you need to be monitoring the dynamics and implementing the various items in that roadmap. Otherwise, the pressure should be, less enforced, I should say, and I can see that there is pressure, but we need to, be cautious in how we implement this, so that it's not like these must happen this way, because there can be fallouts, like a prof indicated, there are people you don't know how prepared they are, and so you will not want the situation where that process, which is seen to be so good, is rather creating more problems. That can be very difficult for everyone to be able to manage. So I think that we've come so far. There is fatigue, there is empathy, all of us, we need to move forward and think about reconciliation. Once we get out of this process, then we say, okay, how do we move forward from there? In order that, and like he said, the two are families, they are just brothers, it happens that, okay, this is how we want to, manage our chieftaincy in terms of succession. Now, along the line, and he talked about the performance of the funerals as the core. I think that one of the things that has been lost is also the documentation of their own processes, And so everyone seems to have the truth, and they are able to talk about the truth depending on how they see it and how they want it to go, And so you will see that even in terms of constitutional rule, the court makes a pronouncement. Makes a pronouncement, then people think otherwise, and they say, okay, we want to go back to traditions and customs. And I think that the Utumfor committee made clearly that they want to restore the traditions and customs of Dagbon. Now, everyone from the factions also are talking about the traditions and customs of Dagbon. The president insisted that they want to restore the traditions, or the performance should be done in accordance with the traditions and customs of Dagbon. Now, the key question is, what are the traditions and customs of Dagbon? And that's where very often people want to find the loopholes and be able to still trouble the system.
But I think it's important to indicate that, the Supreme Court, in interpreting or, bringing that pronouncement, did so within the context of customs. It didn't, just because clearly it's a traditional issue and it is governed by customary law. And so it definitely was brought to bear. So it's just done in line with the custom and tradition of the Dagbon traditional area. I'll be taking some messages and then we'll go for a break and then we'll come back to have another bite at this issue. This one is coming in from Hassan in Yendi. He says, good morning, Abena. We, the people of Dagbon, and for that matter, Yendi, are very happy that this Abudu and Andani issue has come to an end. Good morning, dear panel members. In my humble opinion, I'm not really sure the roadmap presented by the eminent chiefs would bring a lasting solution to the Dagbon crisis. In the first place, one of the gates even refused to attend the presentation ceremony. Instead, they decided to go for a press conference and lambasted the chiefs. This tells you that there is something wrong with the whole setup. I will urge the eminent chiefs not to sit down, but try as much as possible to fulfill the interest of both factions in order to have an everlasting peace in Dagbon. Now, in fulfilling the interests of both parties, definitely there should be a compromise of sorts, as it were. Really. And so that is...
I mean, if you have done peace studies, the first thing you realize is that there are various ways of coming to a compromise. And the main goal is coming to a compromise, getting to yes.
That is the thing. Sides. Getting to yes. We'll get to that when we come back after the break. Let me take the last two messages. This one says, now the biggest problem with this Dagbon issue is that perpetrators of the killing of Yana and Dani have not been identified and punished for the heinous crime they committed. What we're doing right now is like telling the people that no one killed the Dagbon king. Let's always be mindful of the fact that Peace cannot be total and long-lasting without justice. That is Sami in Ashalibutre, Accra. This one says, Paul Kujo Nungwa says, selfish politicians have destroyed our societal values. Thus, until we are able to get the right people into politics, like your panelists, all our institutions will continue to suffer. GES, police servants, etc. will continue to suffer. Paul Kujo Nungwa. Prof, did you hear that?
But I heard that. I heard that very well.
We need to take a break.
Okay.
When we come back, you have your, another bite of that. See you shortly. This is the key points. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're still watching and listening to the key points on TV3, also on 3FM 92.7 and online at 3news.com. Also on our Facebook page, TV3 Ghana. We're looking at the roadmap presented by the Committee of Eminent Chiefs in respect of the Dagbon chieftaincy dispute. The roadmap was presented to the President at the presidency this week by Otumfuo. We are looking at whether indeed this roadmap will bring some lasting peace to the Dagbon traditional area as the eminent chiefs hope it would. So I have some messages I'll just read and then return to the panel. This one coming in says, in fact, listening to Otumfuo, I realized that there are so many gaps to be filled. The Kugana is the embodiment of Dagbon custom, and for him to be absent from the ceremony speaks volumes. This one goes on to say, may Allah disarm all those against Dagbon peace. That is from Abdul Manan in Tamale. I understand we have Dr. Emmanuel Kwesienian back on the line. We'll speak to him quickly on this issue. Hello, good morning. Hello, Doc.
Good morning.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Great. So we're now looking at the Dagbon chieftaincy situation, and we're trying to understand exactly how this roadmap presented by the Committee of Eminent Chiefs would indeed bring about the lasting peace that we all look for to the Dagbon traditional area. Now, we're asking this question because of what transpired at the presentation ceremony, where we realized that the Kugana was not present. And Otumfuo had cause to, inquire about that. And also subsequent developments where we hear that some faction of the Andani family or the Andani Gate had held a press conference, stating their, non-support, if you like, of the whole presentation made by the Otumfuo Mosei Tutu. Your perspectives on this, please.
This is not surprising, actually. Every peace agreement or every peace plan or roadmap is the start or beginning of a very difficult, treacherous, back and forth process. This one will not be different. What makes this peace plan useful and should give us cautious optimism is the agreement on the burial ceremonies. The burial ceremonies, because of the cultural significance and the spiritual significance, had always been the sticking point. So I think if commentators and observers are looking for a peace plan that is perfect from inception without problems, then I think that will not be so. So I think there is a basis for us to say, how do we build more trust, deepening trust amongst all the different stakeholders? How do we begin a process of identifying and implementing particular interventions, that build confidence, what in the earlier nuclear talks we call confidence building measures. So for me, what has been presented is the first step in a very, very long process. So who was there, who wasn't there, who has made a press statement, all those are parts of peace process. It's up to the negotiators and the designers of the peace process now to use backdoor channels to assuage people's fears, calm their emotional head, and then gently nudge them towards the process of a win-win situation. But let me make this point. or 2 points. Peace is not a common good. It's not everyone who wants peace when there has been a crisis, and a crisis where people have benefited from it. 2, I think this is the time for the state of Ghana to indicate to all those who are perceived to be spoilers of this peace plan that, look, the state is willing and prepared and capable of using its coercive powers to ensure that we reach a win-win situation. Because this is not only a Dagbon crisis, this is a Ghana crisis. It tarnishes our image as an international and a global peacekeeper, and therefore there is a cost to this. So I think the onus is on those who have negotiated this plan and their technical advisors, to continue the process of engaging, assuaging, encouraging, and building confidence and trust.
Very well, Doc. Let me ask this question on the back of what you just said about the fact that this is an issue that is bigger than perhaps just the Dagbon traditional area. It's actually a state of Ghana issue. Now, how are we to deal with persons who have, as it were, declared, that they are ready to match the government or the state boot to boot, in order that they resist this whole arrangement for, the roadmap to be implemented? How do we deal with this situation?
Well, I think it's been the failure of the state of Ghana. Well, probably I shouldn't use the word failure, but it's the willingness of the state of Ghana to bend backwards to accede to the demands, reasonable and or unreasonable, from multiple stakeholders in this crisis. Any single group or individual's interest cannot or must be subjected to the bigger interests of Ghana.
Right.
That is one point that the state of Ghana hasn't made consistently and hasn't made strongly. This time round, it's taken us 16 years or so to get to where we are. The momentum is on the side of the good or positive forces and on the state of Ghana. When you make a statement, we will match the state of Ghana boot to boot, you are just joking. The state of Ghana has the coercive powers, it has the intelligence access and the instruments to prove to you that you've committed a crime, you've threatened somebody. This is what the criminal code says. And I've advised those who have been part of it, and I think His Excellency the President must authorize his intelligence services to begin a process of gathering the necessary intelligence so that those who become spoilers to this peace plan can be brought to a court of competent jurisdiction. I think the state has been too laid back, and therefore people think they can always threaten this. You can't threaten the state. Yes,
on that point about the state being laid back is where I go next with this question, where, I mean, given this whole attitude of, because the coercive force or power of the state is not new. We've always had it. The state has always had it. But there's been this level of reluctance, or for lack of a better word, reluctance to, exercise this. So the question then is, what will change with this? Well, what has changed to, give us some level of assurance that something may come out of this roadmap?
Well, look, it is as I said much earlier, it is the agreement around the burial and the schedule of the burial that has been the one of the greatest sticking points. And so far as we have that roadmap starting from the middle of December, then we've made a giant step.
But Doc, this funeral, I mean, this faction within the Adani family is resisting. It's saying that the roadmap suggesting that the late Yana Muhammadu Abdullahi being buried at the Gbewa Palace defies custom and traditions, and that's the basis for them saying that they're going to match the state boot to boot. So in as much as we may think or we may seem to believe that there's that agreement, there's this sense of, well, we don't necessarily have that agreement.
No, are these people claiming that Dotufo and his eminent chiefs basically sat somewhere and drew up this agreement. No. There will always be factions within factions within factions. Okay? These are concentric and overlapping circles of interest. Those who are making these claims or statements have their interest to protect. This is where the state of Ghana must come in, use its intelligence powers, and to say that, look, who are these people? What are their networks? What are their interests? What do they gain by becoming spoilers? And the state must say, look, if there are any actions that they intend to take or have taken before that threatens the interests of Dagbon and the wider Ghanaian state, let's hold them in. Let's have a conversation with them. Let's use the criminal code or whatever applicable laws are here. Look, as a state that has global reputation for keeping peace elsewhere, it undermines that global reputation and credibility if you cannot solve a smaller problem in your own jurisdiction, but you think you can go solve other people's problems. So the implications of keeping this crisis burning to much further actually undermines this country's credibility as a peacemaker. So it is not just about interest that we are looking at here or the Andanic interest. There are bigger interests and bigger games being played. And I think those who are making these statements must be very clear in terms of where they stand and the legality of the positions that they have taken. Because I doubt very much if the state of Ghana is willing and prepared to let this thing drag on forever. From where I sit, it's bad politics for Ghana, it's bad politics for Dagbon, it's bad politics for our global reputation, and therefore it's in our collective interest that we try to assuage the suspicions ahead so that we can move this process to a very successful end. But it will be a tedious, treacherous, difficult process.
Very well. Thank you, Dr. Ening. This is where we'll bring the conversation to a close. We do appreciate your time and contribution and your insights. Thank you so much. Yes. Quickly, then I come to... Yeah,
yes. Kwesi made very, very important points. That it's the national affair. And I believe we should move forward in a bipartisan kind of way to ensure that this process is not stalled. Number two, he talked about the application of force, that the state has coercive powers, which I agree. But then I would want to caution, I would want to warn that in the application of force, when it comes to one side saying we're going to march boot for boot, which I know is possible up there, we need to be very cautious as to how we apply the force so that it doesn't create another bigger problem for us in the resolution of the Dagbon crisis. The third point is that, yes, he mentioned those who have a vested interest in keeping the Dagbon crisis, the status quo, which I have mentioned already. In that sense, intelligence gathering, and I think we have faulted with intelligence where Dagbon is concerned. And so both police intelligence or the security intelligence community should be able to share intelligence. And what happened before the Yana was killed was because of the failure of intelligence to be shared.
Yes.
And I believe that this is the time that intelligence should do a better job.
Very well. Mr. Young, your perspective on this. So, Prof is talking about a bipartisan approach to the implementation of this roadmap in order for it to work. Because, we may not want to say it or, confront it, but there are some political underpinnings to this whole issue. So how do we move forward with this in a bipartisan manner?
I think that basically there is still room for consultations, and we ask the question: why are people raising concerns at the moment when the roadmap is seen to have, involved the two parties and other stakeholders? So it even raises a concern that within one of the factions, the Andani family, are there enough consultations, intra-gate consultations? Who and who represented them? Who and who were the ones who appended their signatures to this roadmap? So there is a question in there, and like we have read in the media, soon or within that period there was a press statement.
Yeah.
So why would they come out to make a press statement when their own people represented them throughout the process and until the roadmap was agreed upon. Now, the need, whether we like it or not, this perception is ripe that there is political interference all through the chieftaincy of Dagbon. It's not now. Now, how do we deal with this? Is that we need to have the two main parties in particular, the UP and the whatever traditions, getting involved in this process. And I think that those who are going to implement this, the current, like the regional Security Council,
Coordinating Council,
Council, they need to have, the National Peace Council, whoever, they need to have the engagement with all these other stakeholders, both parties, so that it's not seen as one party leading this, whether we like it or not, because there is a party in government at the moment and seem to have played a role in the past along the Dagbon chieftaincy process. Then it will be seen as if it is doing its own work.
But this issue has traveled over 3 or 4 administrations, right?
Yes.
Right from Kufuor's era, then late President Mills, then John Dramani Mahama, and now.
Yes, so I take it back even before that time.
Yes.
Yes, I take it back.
In fact, the
because
Kwame Nkrumah, exactly.
Yes, so there is that need for a bipartisan approach, further consultations, even as we implement this roadmap. Otherwise, as I indicate, there might be some fallouts, and that will not be good for us, because like we all agree, this process seemed to be clean and a bit neat in a way. So, but pressure needs to be applied cautiously.
Very well. Great. We'll need to take a break. When we come back, we'll have Mr. Foley's remarks in respect of this, and we'll also try to look at the attempt to reconcile beyond this point, because clearly we need to get to that point. We'll be looking into that when we come back from our short break. See you shortly. Welcome back. We are in the final leg of the show. This is Key Points on TV3, also live on 3FM 92.7 and online at 3news.com, also on our Facebook page, TV3 Ghana. We're still looking at the roadmap presented to the President by the Committee of Eminent Chiefs who were set up or constituted to look into the chieftaincy crisis and prefer solutions for lasting peace. So, Mr. Foley, before the break, we touched on the bit about reconciliation, because ultimately that is what would, bring about sustained peace. And we're looking at the roadmap, which has set up or given dates for the funerals of the two late Yanas. How do we ensure that, we get committed to a sustained peace process in terms of looking at reconciliation?
Right. So for the holding of the funerals, like we said, that will be a critical step to cross a bridge. Once we've crossed that bridge, then the succession issues would come in, and the application of the proper rules of custom.
Right.
So when we get into those rules, then I think we work with them. That's closer to the people. What those rules are is a question who would have to engage.
Right.
Who really holds the rules? Who can speak authoritatively to them? But I think there's also a very good opportunity for the government and the political actors to help this process. Going forward in the next few months, both parties, the major UP tradition and the NDC seeming Nkrumah's tradition.
Yeah, put it correctly.
Yes.
MPP and
NDC. Yes. Can show a lot of leadership by coming together, speaking with one voice on this issue. And like Kwesi said, this is not only a Dagbon issue, it's a Ghana issue. And they can help the reconciliation. I think they have an opportunity to score points by doing the right thing, not to inflame passions further or derail the process after. So for me, it's the role that those two parties will play in encouraging the next steps after we cross the funerals. Yes, will be critical.
Very well. Now, Prof, the Otumfuo in his presentation mentioned that the elders, I believe 4 elders, would be consulting the oracles on the choice of the next Yana. I mean, I'll be speaking for myself at this point. I'm not sure about others, but I was under the impression that succession was just rotationary. Exactly. So you have Abudus and that. So then I asked myself when I heard Otumfuo make that comment that if that's the case, if it's, you know, rotatory, then what's the role of the oracles? If you could educate us on that. I mean, at this point, we're doing some customary law learnings here and, you know, traditional. So what exactly is it? So we get exactly. We can put it within the right perspective.
In actual fact, every kind of situation like this has, or the chieftaincy, this has its own way of choosing the chiefs. In the Dagbon situation, when Ayana dies, the palace is vacated, and the eldest son takes over as the person to perform the funeral. So the palace is vacated, and that is what Otumfuo was. So that's the tradition. And then after the funeral, these four eminent persons consult the oracle. They are the soothsayers who come out to say that the oracle says that this person is the next Yana. And it happens that if the eldest son who becomes the regent in performing the funeral finishes and is inside the palace, if he comes out with the Kugana is the custodian of the regalia, you know, all this, whatever it is. I can't, what we call it, the something I've forgotten, the custodian of the regalia of the chief. I think I've forgotten the name. So they have it the same way. So if the
oracles
confirm him, he could continue.
Okay.
Or it's chosen from the other gate. And so it's not, I think
an automatic
it's not automatic. The Supreme Court wanted to make it a kind of rotational in the automatic way and that sort of thing. But the main tradition is such that the palace should be vacated. And if you remember, that was the sole point which culminated in the killing of the king. That
Yes.
The Abudus wanted the palace to be vacated for the funeral of the, and the fear was that then it would mean that this Adania would not come back, kind of. So that is the reason why it has become a very thorny issue involving the oracles, involving the who comes to the palace, who wears the regalia to perform the funeral, and who may become. So one side may lose anyway.
Right.
That's right.
Right. And this whole thing stems from the fact that, I mean, there's this thing about lineage, which will be confirmed after the funeral. Because if the funeral is not done in a certain way, then your generations unborn are not going to benefit from that whole lineage of, you know, is it a royal lineage, as it were. Mr. Yang, I think we have just about 2 minutes to go. If you could kindly, your concluding remarks on this, ONEP's perspectives on, you know, bringing peace to the Dagbon traditional area.
I think that we've reached somewhere, and like indicated, if we are implementing this process, then there is a need for caution. The issues that have brought the people of Dagbon to where they are now, you know, will not be the same issues, you know, that will enable them to resolve the issues. So there is the need for kind of adopting a different approach, you know, to addressing the issues. Otherwise, it can be very difficult. Like Dr. Enin indicated, we have the issues of emotions and the loss that people think they have endured, you know, over the time. And so we need to be very cautious. And you look at it, we look at it in a way that tomorrow we are the same people, brothers, and that we are going to live together in the same Dagbon. There is not going to be a different Dagbon created for any of the groups, you know, and both parties want peace. If you listen to them, they talk about peace, and they are champions for peace.
But some are pushing for justice before peace.
Yes, and the issue of justice, you need to look at it in a different way. Now, under what circumstances did the actions occur? You know, under are the issues prosecutorial, and are they prosecutable? Who are the suspects? Are there evidences before any competent court of jurisdiction? A lot of things need to go in there, and that is a criminal aspect. If any state or any group will need to establish. So once there is that quest for peace, I think that from the side of government, from the side of NDC, NPP, from the side of the two parties, who are in dispute, everyone needs to be thinking about the future. Right. How do we move forward? Right. And once we cross this bridge, and it means that within the period of performance of the funerals, there is so much, that needs to be done. The government, the security agencies need to increase their surveillance and gather intelligence to be able to mitigate the risks that may arise out of this. Right. Then the parties themselves, need to be consulted, along the sides, kind of caucus, and then addressing some of the fears that are making them having these resistance to the issues.
Great. Lastly, I think it's just a minute we have, or even we have run out of time, but clearly there are two sides, the traditional sides, which has been dealt with by the eminent chiefs, and then there's a criminal side, which Mr. Yolyang just broached. Quickly, your perspectives dealing with that. Clearly,
let's hasten slowly. Let's get the traditional side done, and then we can come to the criminal side. Much as I teach law, I work with law, in such circumstances, one will be very, very careful how you foster I would say, this postmodern criminal justice system on such processes.
On such a traditional...
Those who want to benefit from this system would actually not let you go to the next step. Wow. They will use this as a bargaining tool, that you want to punish us and then stall the whole process again.
So
let's not rush
peace.
too much things, What the gains we have made, let's work with them and proceed cautiously.
Just a quick note.
Sure.
Very quickly. It's an opportunity.
30 seconds.
It's an opportunity, and let's not miss this opportunity. Because Dagbon has not been resolved, there are several other towns around which have also gotten. So let us not miss this opportunity.
Very well. Let's not miss this opportunity is the take home from this discussion. Indeed, it's been an interesting conversation here. We say a big thank you to Professor Vladimir Intridanso, also to Mr. Edmund Foley, also Mr. Albert Yolyang, and of course, Dr. Emmanuel Kwesi Enim, who joined us on phone. Thank you so much for sending through your comments and spending your Saturday morning with us. We do appreciate that. We'll be back here same time next week. My name is Abna Tebi. Do have yourselves a very good weekend and a productive week. Bye-bye.